Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gail, and for anyone who's new to this channel and new to this video, who's tuning in for the first time, I am a transsexual. So that means that I've had gender surgery. I started my transition in the early 90s, um, and I waited a long time before I decided to actually have the surgery, because I wanted to be sure, and it's the best thing I've ever done. Um, but obviously since then I've kind of progressed with my life. I've gone on with my life quietly, and I've got a nice job. I pay tax. Um, I generally get on very well with people. Um, no issues whatsoever. And yeah, for the most part, where possible, I've used accessible toilets, but where it's not possible, I've used female toilets as well. And there was a time I was using female changing rooms, and then I became very kind of self-conscious because as you get older, you kind of get a bit fatter, and so it was more of a body thing that I stopped going to the gym, but I want to restart again. So where are we now? So I don't know the specifics of it because I'm not that clued up on the Supreme Court ruling, but basically it was a definition of what is a woman, what is the biological sex, and um, and I've never been in doubt that the I suppose the chromosomal makeup of my body is like that of a male. Um, I started to develop as a male, so I know there was no sort of intersex stuff going on, and yeah, it's I had a choice when I was like, I think I was probably about 22, where I think if I hadn't had decided to do something about and change my life by getting counselling to begin with, and then I think it was I saw a psychologist, then psychiatrists. If I hadn't gone down that route, I mean, I wasn't a basket case. I was working out a job, so I was functioning, but I wasn't actually living. Um, so if I hadn't gone down that route, there was like I remember one particular night I was in tears in a bar. So I am essentially, for all intents and purposes, a young man in a bar on a very very quiet Tuesday evening, and I'm almost in tears. And it was a barmaid who she actually, or the lady serving me on the bar, actually sort of spent a bit of time just talking to me, and she didn't really. I never really kind of like went into too much about why I was so upset, but she said something like, just need to do something about this situation, and before or the situation that you feel that you're. And I think she knew because I alluded a little bit. But yeah, it's a very sort of blurry memory because I was drinking quite a lot as well, and I was only young. 23 is young, and I wasn't a big drinker. But I was going through a really, really hard time, and I decided, I needed to do something. So I wasn't like a 12-year-old. I mean, I'd felt like this since my earliest memories. But yeah, I mean, this was 70s and 80s, so you can't just, jump into these things. Nothing really existed to help you back then. So yeah, that was the age I decided to do something about it, and I sought help, and I was working in the same job up until about 1998, and it was nothing related to being trans, but I had to have a knee operation. It was an old sporting injury, and essentially I couldn't go back into the same job. So it meant that because there was a lot of bending and I don't know, a lot of pressure on your knees and stuff. So I, yeah, I decided that was my time to move on, if you like. So I found myself unemployed. Um, Not much in the way of mobility physically. And whereas I had a nice company car before, I didn't have any company car. I lived on a housing estate. Um, and what I found was I think it was 99, I got surrounded by a gang on the estate, basically demanding to know what I was. So it was quite frightening. Um, I still don't know how I got out of that situation. I think I was so low in my self-esteem and everything that I just essentially told them. And the gang leader, I call them a gang. There was about 20 of them. The gang leader said, "Yeah, you know, fair game to you. Go along your way," sort of thing. Which I did, and so that was that. But it was frightening, and you kind of felt like you was imprisoned a lot of the time in your own property, because you didn't want to have that similar encounter when you went out. And I don't know whether it's the same year, but there was an article in the local paper, and I'm not going to go into too much, but it was about a reverend, I think, who was um, having she either had gender surgery or was having gender surgery, and she was a practicing reverend. I'm not sure. Because again, I don't know too much about religion, so if a vicar or reverend or something like that. Um, and there was a really scathing news story about her, you know, essentially painting her as a pervert of society, and it was kind of like a microcosm of what you have now on social media, but it was in printed form, and it was by a journalist who I knew nothing about. And after that, when you what you have to understand is, I was born male. I was male through my teens and into my early 20s. And the one thing you don't want to do is get into a situation where you have to show aggression, because women get angry, kids get angry, women get angry, old people get angry. But if a trans woman gets angry, and then it is, it's because they're male. And I didn't really want to kind of get into that situation, but I felt that when you get backed into a corner by society, and yeah, things were you were getting quite rough back then where I lived, and when I felt like I was backed into a corner in society. It only needs to happen a couple of times for you to experience that, to know that that is what it is. When you get backed into a corner, you've got two choices. You can either just curl up and cry and die, and I did a little bit of that, or you can actually, yeah, I actually have to come out fighting, and and women do this, as I said, men do this, and so do trans people when they get backed into a corner. And you'll find actually, from here on in, a lot of trans people who are professional, career-oriented people, they will come out fighting. And I think they're not necessarily 100% going to be fighting the Supreme Court ruling, although I'm fairly sure some will. But they'll be fighting this, all of a sudden, this massive witch hunt that's going on. So anyway, back to the story. I contacted the editor of a paper, and I can't remember. I think I wrote to him. I used to write a lot of letters in those days, and some of them were some of them were to do with, because I didn't have much money. So if I bought something nice and it turned out to be bland or not as described, I would often write the company a letter, and cheekily they would send a voucher for maybe, half price this, half price that, which I thought was a nice gesture, and I felt that the feedback was important. So I wrote the edit I wrote the editor a letter. I explained exactly how I felt about this article, and how it kind of paints, um, you know a vulnerable section of society with a quite a horrible brush, and um, and that was it. I just wanted to get off my chest. I left my telephone number on there because I was quite open about, a two-way conversation if they wanted it. I got a call back. I was basically just milling around my house one day, and I got a call back, and kind of picked up the phone, and the person on the other line said, "Hi, my name is blah blah blah. You contacted my editor. Do you want to do a story?" And I said, can you just repeat your name? And I won't repeat her name, because yeah, I don't want you. It's an old story, and um, but yeah, she said, my name is blah blah blah, and do you want to do a story? Kind of set the record straight. Um, and it was the actual journalist that actually wrote the article. So I agreed to come in. I was a little bit skeptical because I was still a bit naive, but I was a little bit skeptical about life. But I kind of felt, what the hell? I didn't feel I was getting much support from anyone really at the time. So I thought, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and I arrived at the newspaper offices, which were in my local town, and what I didn't know was actually that this woman was a very prominent journalist, and she also had a radio show with, I think, one Jeremy Kyle. And if you can believe this, he actually played the good cop to her bad cop. So I was dealing with somebody that was more potent than Jeremy Kyle. So anyway, I turned up at the office on the day, and I sat in the lobby. They had like these, I don't call it, like the diner kind of seats in there. So I just pulled up on one of these like black leather sofas, this like diner seat, and I just sat there and waited for. I'm not gonna sort of stand around too much. She's been told I'm here, so she can come and find me. And sure enough, she came down, and um, she walked back, she walked forwards, she came back again, came forwards, and in the end, I said, right, right, I'll put her out of misery. I'll tell her I'm here. So I said to her, I'm here. I mean, she had glanced over at me a few times, but I was trying to. I needed to make a point with her, which was that we weren't all dockers in frocks. Um, anyway, so I had an interview with her. She did a maybe 3-page spread on my story. It was probably about 90% correct, and 10% she used, I don't know, for artistic license, and it caused a little bit of friction amongst family and friends and associates. Um, but most of the people who read it were very kind of favourable. I'm talking about neighbours, people who sort of knew me, but they weren't trans related or anything, and they were like very very complimentary about what I'd done, and they said it was quite an important thing. And I thought, after that, um, things, generally kind of started to improve my life, and I thought, it's great. And then in 2010, the Equality Act happened, which again I didn't really kind of take too much notice of, because I lived through the 90s with this, and I just wanted protection. I wanted to feel that I was safe to go out. I wanted to feel that I was um, not going to be attacked by the public because of what somebody else was saying, physically or verbally. That was a big deal for me, and yeah, I just wanted to kind of generally just feel, you know, just to get on with my life, quietly, and for 25 years, that's more or less happened. Obviously, until about 6 weeks ago. So now I feel that it is a topic that I'm gonna have to talk about a little bit, and there will be people who will kind of tune into this video to literally troll it, and it's the same things people always say. It's the trope, you're a man, you're you're autogynephilic, which is crazy, really, because why have you harassed women in toilets for the last 25 years, which is something I've also heard, and I'm smiling because it's a that itself is an absolute load of crap. Um, you know, why would I go through you know years of um, counselling, psychological and psychiatric evaluation, and excruciating surgery to go into a women's bathroom and harass them. I could probably just throw on a wig and do that if I really wanted to do that as a man. Um, I I respect women. I respect. I've tried to respect women's spaces. I've never tried to muscle in on women's groups. Um, I've never claimed to be a woman. I've never. I've had to use the toilet. I mean, when I was transitioning, you didn't have a Costa on every corner. I mean, there were cafes, but not nearly as many as there are now. And yeah, it's I've had to use these spaces. I've had to use changing rooms as well. I wasn't very comfortable doing that because, like I said, I'm quite body conscious, and I respect that these are female spaces, and it was. I used to be able to change in a change room, but in a private cubicle, which was a lot better for me because I hated, wouldn't like open plan and stuff like that. Um, so in a nutshell, that is my story from 1999, 2000, and to conclude, I feel at this point in time I am right back in 1999. Um, a lot older, worse health, and probably a lot less able to defend myself um, physically if I was ever attacked. I don't have great balance. Um, I might have to improve my fitness. And these are the things that are going through people's minds right now. And also, a lot of people have gotten on with their lives. They've worked in companies for many many years, and what's going on now means that they've kind of literally got to out themselves to appease a couple of women from Mumsnet and to appease internet, social media, YouTube um, trolls, basically. I But don't get me wrong, I do have opinions on the Supreme Court ruling as well, and I will share them with you. And you might be, and this is where a lot of people are going to fall out with me, um, because yeah, I will share those feelings. So don't think this is like one of these ideological cult like YouTube videos. I'm quite an objective individual. I like to think I have watched many videos over the last 6 weeks with the other side of the argument. People who are found to be persuasive in their argument, but also very one sided in their argument. And I think when you can present a one sided argument, there's always that chance that um, it's almost like, well, there isn't another argument for this, so this is the truth, this is the reality. There is no other argument. So that is where I'm at now. But I will do another video about the arguments and what I've learned from these other YouTubers um, and the subjects. Maybe stuff about the Cash Report, Tavistock Clinic, um, and yeah, stuff I wasn't even aware of about the gender recognition certificates, and how people who I would probably have called trannies back in the day have have kind of abused the trust of being trans, and yeah, and they have they sought to invade women's spaces in a very misogynistic way, And I feel terrible saying that. I feel like I'm somehow betraying trans. I mean, I am transsexual. And when back in the days when I came out, you had drag queens, transvestites, and or like cross dressers who. So I mean, the difference to me, the drag queens were mainly gay guys who dressed up for performance. You'd see them in the clubs and in the bars. Your transvestites was maybe guys who would dress up, um, go to a for at home, or maybe they go to a specific place, support group to do that, and then they go back home. When you had like cross dressers who were a lot more outgoing, they would go to nightclubs, have a good dance around, and a lot of these cross dressers, people say autogynephilic and all that kind of stuff. They were literally, I would say, they weren't interested. They were just interested in dressing in the clothes of the opposite gender and just going out and dancing the night away and then going home, having a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun to be around. And then you had the transsexuals who were essentially how I felt. So I quickly learnt when I kind of first came out that, where I was on the spectrum of everything. When nobody called themselves trans back then, there was nobody called themselves transgender. That was a term that kind of like sort of like, I don't know where it came from, maybe America, but it kind of came into the consciousness in the 2000s, and that's when the activism came more. And literally that's when I would start bumping into activists, and I kind of felt really uncomfortable. I didn't know how to deal with them. I didn't know what to say to them. I was worried to say anything to them a lot of times. I remember one situation where we kind of went out, and this was a friend of mine actually, and but she had sort of union connections, and also I kind of felt there was a little bit of activism there. She had all the terminology already lined up in her head, and yeah, she kind of came out, probably 12, 13. No, actually was it about 14 years into, after I transitioned, and yeah, she kind of made her way into my friends' network as well, so which, very disruptive, bit manipulative, and and we were out one night, and I had a friend from college, a lovely woman, and she said, "Right then, guys, let's get in this club." And it kicked off. It literally kicked off that she couldn't handle the generic term "guys." Um, and it's just bizarre. And I use that term all the time when I'm working. Um, so yeah, that I was introduced to this idea of activism, which I didn't particularly like because I didn't particularly understand it. Just seemed to be very aggressive people. And yeah, and this term transgender appeared. So yeah, and that kind of brings us like full circle to today. I wasn't aware of the frequency of people going to the Tavistock clinic either. So younger people, and I wasn't aware that these probably the same people I encountered were probably um I don't like to use the word grooming, but it's probably not far from the truth. When you have an ideology and you try to put it onto younger people. Um, and there is something a bit weird about that anyway. Um, to actually encourage anyone to, seek seek hormone therapy, which was, essentially what it was. And anyone that came to me and said, I'm young, I'm trans, I want to do this, I usually just said, do you understand what kind of life you're getting into? I know, and my favorite go-to thing was, if you want to be a woman as you think a woman is, uh, imagine yourself as an old woman. How do you feel then? Um, didn't have a lot of those conversations, but when I had the opportunity to tell people, I was like is it the antithesis of an ideology? I was like the anti-ideologist. I would, try and deter people basically from going down this road. Um, because I know it comes with a lot of pain, especially if you're gender dysphoric, which I was. Yeah, that's a story for another day. Anyway, I'm gonna cut it there. I didn't mean for it to go on this long actually, but there you go. So essentially, it was just my story about what happened in '99 and how I think it's come full circle. So anyway, I hope you take care of yourself, and I want to try and I want to try and make this channel more positive, because it's not just about putting out political idea and just putting out ideologies about this and that. It's I think we're more than that as human beings. I think we are human beings, and the people that, and this is the thing that upsets me, and I'll leave it with for the people that come out and say such horrible things on the internet. I guarantee you, if I was to sit down and have a coffee with them, we would have a lot more in common than just that little thing. Um, and I know that's an old trope that people reel out, but it's very, very true. If I was to sit down with them, there's some people you'll meet, you'll never have anything in common with them. But if I was to sit down with these people, to put it this way, if I was to sit down with half of people that kind of troll my comments about this subject on other people's videos about the anti-trans kind of stuff, then I would probably have a lot more in common with them than I have with a trans activist. So there you go. And that's the sad thing about it. We need to be more. We need to sort of celebrate our differences. But you know what? It's very difficult to say that in this climate at the moment. And I will get on to some of the issues that I've heard of recent, just to kind of clarify how I feel about them, because I'm allowed an opinion as an individual about the subject, and there are things I kind of feel quite strongly about, but there's other things I kind of feel quite passionate about too. So I'll get onto them at another time. Anyway, take care. Um, if you're going to make nasty comments in on this channel, just be aware of one thing. I've got a couple of other channels. I've been doing them for a long time. I comments just tend negative comments and downright rude comments. Actually, if it's really nasty comment, probably YouTube will filter it out and I'll never know about it. But nasty comments that people have thought, how can I get around the YouTube algorithms that pick these things up? They'll literally roll off me like Teflon. I am Teflon to a lot of this stuff now, so just bear in mind that if you say something really nasty and you get it posted, um, I will still go out tomorrow and enjoy the sunshine. Maybe have a cappuccino. Perhaps go to work if I'm at work, which I'm not at the moment. I'm on holiday, and I'll have a lovely, lovely day. I won't even give your thought a second thought. Um, and although it's nice to get support, when I'm away from YouTube, I'm away from YouTube, and I'm doing my own thing, and I'm getting on with my day and achieving what I need to achieve. And that's what you need to know if you want to post something really, really horrible. So there you go. With that, have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and take care, and I will speak to you all soon.